"You forgot your umbrella," Black Waitress said. The billionaire turned around in tears. The rain had been falling for hours, drumming soft and steady against the diner's windows. Maya stood behind the counter, her apron still damp from the dinner rush, wiping down the same spot on the formica for the third time. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. Most nights, she didn't mind the quiet that followed the chaos. But tonight felt different, heavier somehow, like the storm outside had found its way into her chest. She glanced toward the door as the last customer of the night pushed it open, letting in a gust of cold air and the smell of wet pavement. He was older, maybe in his 60s, wearing a coat that looked too expensive for this part of town. He didn't look at her when he sat down. Just stared at the menu like he was reading a letter he'd memorized years ago. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Maya poured him coffee without asking. "That's what you did in a place like this. You learned to read people by the way they carried themselves." He wrapped both hands around the cup like he was trying to warm something deeper than his fingers. "Just the coffee tonight?" she asked gently. He nodded, still not meeting her eyes. She'd been working at Lou's Diner for 3 years now, ever since she moved to the city with dreams bigger than her paycheck. Every morning at 6, she tied her hair back and put on the same smile she'd worn the day before. The regulars knew her name. Old Mr. Kowalski always left her $2 folded into a tiny square. The high school kids called her Miss Maya and sometimes stayed past closing just to talk about their problems. She listened because someone had once listened to her. But this man, he was different. He sat in the corner booth, the one by the window where the neon sign from the pawn shop across the street cast everything in shades of blue and pink. His hands shook slightly as he lifted the cup to his lips. Maya busied herself restocking napkins, but she kept glancing his way. There was something about the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened every time he swallowed. She'd seen that look before, on her own face, in the mirror, the night her mother called to say she couldn't help with rent anymore. An hour passed. He ordered nothing else, just sat there watching the rain trace rivers down the glass. When Maya finally walked over to refill his cup, she noticed something on the seat beside him, a black umbrella, sleek and expensive looking, with a silver handle that caught the light. "Looks like the storm's not letting up," she said softly. He looked up at her then, really looked at her, and she saw it, the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. His eyes were red-rimmed, hollow. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose it's not." When he finally stood to leave, he pulled out his wallet and left a $50 bill on the table. Maya's heart jumped. That was more than she made in tips most nights. But before she could thank him, he was already walking toward the door, his coat pulled tight against the wind that howled outside. That's when she saw it. The umbrella, still sitting in the booth, forgotten. "Sir. Wait." Maya grabbed the umbrella and rushed toward the door, pushing it open just as he stepped into the rain. "You forgot your umbrella," she called out. He stopped, turned around slowly, and when the streetlight caught his face, she saw tears streaming down his cheeks, mixing with the rain. For a moment, neither of them moved. The water soaked through her apron, her shoes, but Maya couldn't look away from the broken expression on this stranger's face. He stared at the umbrella in her hand like it was something holy, something lost. His voice cracked. "I didn't think anyone would notice." Maya's throat tightened. She stepped closer, holding the umbrella out to him. "How could I not notice? You'll catch a cold out here." He took it from her with trembling hands, and then, to her surprise, he laughed, a rough, painful sound. "Do you know what today is?" She shook her head. "It's my daughter's birthday." He looked down at the umbrella, running his thumb along the silver handle. "I gave this to her 10 years ago. Told her it would keep her safe no matter what storm came her way." His breath hitched. "She died 3 years ago. Car accident. I wasn't there." Maya's chest ached. She wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small for the weight of what he'd just shared. "I've been carrying this umbrella everywhere since," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like if I held onto it tight enough, I could hold on to her. But tonight I was going to leave it behind. I was going to leave everything behind." The rain fell harder, but Maya didn't move. She understood now, the expensive coat, the hollow eyes, the way he'd sat in that booth like he was saying goodbye to the world. She would want you to use it, Maya said softly. She would want you to stay dry. To stay here. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Asterisk if this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Asterisk. He opened the umbrella, and for the first time that night, he smiled. It was small, fragile, but it was there. What's your name? He asked. Maya. Thank you, Maya. He paused, then added, for noticing. Maya went back inside, her clothes dripping water onto the checkered floor. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from everything she'd just witnessed. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, closing her eyes. She thought about her own storms. The ones that didn't come with rain or thunder, but with overdue bills and lonely nights in a studio apartment that never quite felt like home. She thought about the calls she didn't return, the dreams she'd put on hold, the way she'd learned to smile even when her heart felt heavy. Her co-worker, Diane, had once asked her why she stayed at the diner when she could have been doing something else, something that paid better, that didn't leave her feet aching and her back sore. Maya hadn't known how to explain it then. But tonight, standing in the empty diner with rain hammering against the windows, she understood. She stayed because people needed a place like this. A place where the coffee was always hot, where someone remembered your name, where you could sit in a booth at midnight and not feel completely alone. The next morning, Maya came in early. The sun was just starting to break through the clouds, casting everything in soft gold. She made coffee, set up the tables, and tried to focus on the routine. But her mind kept drifting back to the man from last night, wondering if he was okay, if he'd made it through the storm. Around noon, the door chimed. She looked up from pouring coffee for Mr. Kowalski, and there he was. The man from last night, standing in the doorway with the black umbrella tucked under his arm. He looked different in the daylight. Steadier. His eyes were still sad, but there was something else there too, a quiet determination. Maya's heart clenched, but she didn't interrupt. And then you ran after me. For an umbrella. He shook his head, his eyes glistening. Such a small thing. But it reminded me that people still see each other. That someone still cares enough to notice. Asterisk, have you ever faced something like this? Share your story in the comments. Asterisk. Maya reached across the counter and placed her hand over his. I'm glad you came back. So am I, he whispered. His name was Robert. Over the next few weeks, he became a regular, not the kind who came in once and disappeared, but the kind who sat in the same booth every Tuesday and Thursday evening, always ordering coffee and pie, always leaving a generous tip. They talked. About small things at first, the weather, the city, the best time to visit the park down the street. Then, slowly, about bigger things. He told her about his daughter, Caroline, who'd loved art and thunderstorms and old movies. How she used to call him every Sunday just to say hello. How he'd spent 3 years blaming himself for not being there when it mattered most. Maya told him about her own losses, the scholarship she'd lost, the family she'd left behind, the way she sometimes felt invisible in a city full of people. She told him about the nights when she counted her tips and wondered if she'd ever be able to save enough to go back to school, to become the teacher she'd always dreamed of being. One evening, Robert came in with an envelope. He slid it across the table toward her. What's this? Maya asked. Open it. Inside was a check, more money than she'd ever seen with her name on it. Her hands trembled. I can't accept this. You already did, Robert said gently. The night you ran after me in the rain. You saved my life, Maya. Let me do something for yours. Tears blurred her vision. I was just returning your umbrella. You gave me a reason to use it. He reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. Caroline would have liked you. She always believed in small acts of kindness. Said they were the ones that changed the world. Maya looked down at the check, then back at Robert. For the first time in years, she felt something crack open inside her, not breaking, but blooming. Hope. Possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll use it. Say you'll become that teacher. Say you'll keep noticing people, Maya, because the world needs more people like you. Asterisk if you've been enjoying this story, subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Asterisk. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the diner in shades of amber and rose. Maya wiped her eyes and smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached all the way down to the parts of her that had forgotten how to feel light. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me too." 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a classroom for the first time. 23 pairs of eyes looked up at her, curious and bright. She'd used Robert's gift to finish her degree, to finally become the person she'd always wanted to be. But she still worked at Lou's diner 2 nights a week, not because she had to, but because it mattered. Robert came to her first day of teaching. He sat in the back of the room during her lunch break, beaming like a proud father. When the kids asked who he was, Maya smiled and said, "A friend who taught me that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the biggest weight." They still met for coffee every Tuesday evening. He'd tell her stories about Caroline, and Maya would share funny moments from her classroom. The umbrella, Caroline's umbrella, stayed propped by the door of the diner, a silent reminder of the night everything changed. One evening, as they sat in their usual booth watching the sun dip below the horizon, Robert reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. "I want you to have this," he said. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny umbrella charm. "Robert, It was Caroline's," he interrupted gently. "And I think she'd want you to wear it. As a reminder that even in the darkest storms, there are people who will run after you. People who notice." Maya fastened it around her neck, her fingers lingering on the cool metal. She thought about that rainy night, about how close she'd come to losing someone she hadn't even known. About how a single act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you'd never expect. "You changed my life too, you know," she said softly. Robert smiled. "Maybe we changed each other's." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping gently against the window. But inside, the diner was warm and bright. Maya looked around at the familiar faces, Mr. Kowalski reading his paper, Diane laughing at something on her phone, the high school kids huddled in a corner booth planning their futures. This was home. Not the building, but the people in it. The connections. The moments that mattered. She touched the umbrella charm at her throat and smiled. Sometimes, the smallest acts of noticing change everything. Asterisk if you enjoyed this story, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Asterisk.